Welcome back, fellow listeners. Just want to say thank you for tuning on in. Today, we're going to be doing Hair 101. Very good episode, lots of tips and information. Before we get started, just want to remind you to like, thumbs up, subscribe, and check us out on all your favorite platforms.
Excellent. So this is going to be the breakdown without getting too sciencey on all you guys. So hair 101. You have the follicle, the cuticle, and the cortex. So the follicle being like the scalp and how the nutrition in your body and the keratin is being formed. And then each strand of hair will have a cortex, which is the center, the core, and the cuticle, which is kind of like what you would say the cuticle on your fingernails. It's like, flexible. I like to think of them as almost like shutters on windows. And if you
Hmm.
are curious, you can Google like a magnified hair shaft by like 1,000%, and you'll see all of they look like scales. And when your hair is really, really shiny, they're all laying perfectly flat.
Mm.
So let's get into chemicals real quick for salon chemicals. So there are two types of color or uh, retexturizing. And when I say retexturizing, I mean like um, adjusting the texture of the hair. So relaxers, straighteners, keratins, Japanese straighteners. So, and then of course we have like permanent color, semi-permanent color, and we call them direct dyes when they'll last only a certain number of shampoos. So when one of those things is permanent, it is lifting up the cuticles and changing the cortex on the inside. And just to let you know, permanent means it's forever going to change your hair, like until you cut it off. But I have had people, and I'm not making fun. It's not going to change how your hair grows out of your head. It will always do the same thing that it has done. Well, except besides going white. But, like a permanent Japanese straightener is awesome because it is permanently straightening your hair. So if you wanted it straight, they're awesome, but you will have outgrowth that is curly or whatever your natural texture has always been. And then so you might have like 2 inches of really curly hair and then 10 more inches of perfectly straight hair. So these are the pluses and minuses of some of these processes that we do in your hair.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about retexturizing hair, so the keratin is a semi-permanent. So a keratin will last you probably about 3 months, would you say?
Give or take 3 to 5 months for a full, anywhere 6 to 8 weeks for an express. I think it depends on how often you wash them because again, they're semi,
Yes.
which means they're not in the cortex. They lie on the surface of the hair, which means they wash out. So the more you
Yes.
wash your hair, the sooner they come out, and therefore, which we will elaborate more after Barbara finishes her next sentence.
So thank you. You're like Judge Judy after the next sentence.
Hey, she's a bad bitch. I like Judge Judy.
Me too.
She'll
Okay,
call you out.
so semi-permanent color sits on top of the cuticle. And well, semi and demi. Okay, let's not really go into that. There's demi-permanent color and there's semi-permanent color. They're very, very similar. And basically, I think demi is stronger than semi, but it's not permanent. And it would be like some of the color molecules are inside, like underneath the cuticle, but not penetrating into the cortex, which would make it permanent. So, keratin is a semi-permanent hair treatment. And we would call them, I've always been taught to make sure that you call them smoothing treatments and not straightening treatments because they really don't straighten your hair. A hair straightener is really quite like a permanent solution and not keratin, which is semi-permanent.
Yeah, so it's basically when I try, because I do a ton of keratin treatments, and what I try to explain to my clients is the difference between that and something that's permanent, like a Japanese or a perm or an old school relaxer, is that it is altering the cuticle bond of the hair. basically, right? Which is going all the way into the cortex. And
Yes.
that's what happens. It changes it permanently.
Yes. So I
Hmm.
was I'm glad you said that, but also I'm not like wanting to get into the bonds inside the hair. I feel like I'm going to lose people and that's not
Mm,
going to be interesting. So
right.
but
Yeah,
let
there's a
me
lot of information. There is.
yes. Yes.
Right.
Okay. So but just as a listener or even as a hairstylist, if this is our refresher.
Hmm.
Um when it comes to those permanent retexturizing services, there's the relaxer and the perm. Okay. And I thought this was really funny. People sometimes call a relaxer a perm because it's like a permanent relaxer. And technically, a perm is what, all of us white girls call a permanent wave. But really, they're both using very similar chemicals. So, most permanent relaxers are made for ethnic hair, and they're either sodium hydroxide or a lye, which is sounds like I'm
Sounds
saying it's a
like,
lie.
uh,
LYE.
or isn't that the same shit that they use to like melt bones when you kill someone?
Oh,
Okay,
and
that's
make soap.
oh, whew,
Okay,
okay,
okay.
sorry. Different subject. Sorry. Oops.
No worries, no worries. So most of those permanent relaxers that are made for ethnic hair are made with sodium hydroxide. And they can be lye or no lye, but sodium hydroxide is the one major chemical to restructurize the hair versus ammonium thioglycolate, which is what people generally use who have finer hair. And almost all perms, like permanent waves, I'm sorry, are using ammonium thioglycolate. So with fine hair, you could use ammonium thioglycolate to straighten the hair because it's basically you're breaking the hair down, the structure of it on the inside, and then you're going to either wrap it around a perm rod or comb it straight and then try to reset it into put it back into its permanent state and have it stay in that same structure. So, interesting topic. If you're from the 90s, which I was a teenager in
Mm-hmm.
the 90s, um, you'll remember Nair, that cream that you can put on your legs and it makes the hair dissolve.
Mm-hmm.
Nair is made from a mixture of sodium hydroxide and ammonium thioglycolate.
Really? I actually did not know that.
It is, and that's why,
Oh,
if you remember all the way back to beauty school, you cannot put one relaxer on top of the other. So sodium, if someone has had a sodium relaxer, you can't put ammonium thioglycolate on top of it, or it will melt their hair and it will break.
hence Nair. Hair removal.
Yes.
Okay.
So this is why the consultations are so important, and you have to know what is already on your hair.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the dangers of getting a little willy-nilly with the box products at the store.
Right. And permanent, because if you're doing semi-permanent, it's not so much
Yes, agreed.
necessary, to know what was used before because they're semi, they're not really going further and breaking down the cuticle bond.
Yes, exactly. And then also, I wanted to mention, I don't know that people realize this. Most people's hair grows on average half an inch a month. Yes?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so it's helpful when you see how long your hair is to know how many inches it is so that you can calculate how many years it has been there because what will help you understand what you have on your hair. So
Mm-hmm.
if you had a relaxer of one type 4 years ago and it's down here on your ends, you still can't put that other relaxer on top of it without it breaking your hair.
Mm-hmm.
These are big also considerations for hair color and lightening and doing highlights over top of permanent color. It just reacts totally differently. And also, um, I recall the figure of it's about 100 strands a day that you lose naturally. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes. And
Yes.
that's considered normal. But I would also like to emphasize on that 100 strands on short hair will look different on 100 strands of someone with long hair. Because if you
Yes.
take one piece and you wrap it around, it looks like a lot more hair. So I like to tell clients, as your hair gets longer, it might seem and feel like you're losing more than 100 strands, but you're probably not. It's more of
Yes.
the illusion. So just like a good little tip to know when your hair is longer, It might seem like you're losing more, but you're really not, you
Yes,
know?
and if your hair is
Yeah.
really straight like mine, it tends to fall off and fall onto you and your clothes and everything else. If you have curly hair or, like, nice thick hair, it might fall off, meaning, like, detach from your scalp, but still be kinda in the mix. So when you brush your hair, you have a ton in your brush. And so we wanna bring this up because when you stress out about losing hair, you actually lose hair.
Yes, it's normal. It's normal to lose hair, but when you have straighter hair, you might see it more in your sink or on the floor, opposed to someone who has wavy or curly hair. You're going to see it more in your brush because when you have that textured hair, it kind of, when it falls, it's almost like these little, things that kind of grab onto the other hair. So that's
Yes.
why it doesn't fall on the floor. It has something to,
Yes.
like little tree branches to kind of like hook themselves to. So that's why you'll notice it more in your brush, opposed to someone who has really straight hair.
Yes, and
Hmm.
also, another aspect of hair I wanted to mention is fine versus coarse and thin versus dense, because a lot of times we mix these things up. So, fine hair, meaning like an individual hair, how like thick or thin it is. So, a coarse piece of hair would be really sturdy, hard to snap if you were to pull on it. Um, Fine hair being, uh, smaller pieces, easy to break, and usually silkier, but that can be an uphill battle too. And
Right, and
then
it
oh,
also
go ahead.
that also takes, like, in the diameter.
Yes, yes. And something that's been helpful to me in classes and whatnot is learning that to kind of like create analogies of like super fine hair is kind of like the fabric silk, whereas super coarse hair would be almost like wool. And then you've got linen and all these other things in between.
Mhm.
So those are big considerations for your hairstylist. Also, the thin versus dense would refer to like per square inch of your scalp, how many hairs you have.
Right, so back to that, the diameter thing that I was saying, usually finer hair has a lesser diameter. So think
Yes.
of like little circles, right? So finer hair, your circles can be really small. Coarse has typically, it's a bigger circle, right? So now when you look at the follicle on the scalp, right? It's kind of like a pore. So when you have fine hair, like me, my hair is very fine, but I have a ton of it. I have 2 or 3 hairs per follicle, right? Normally, people that have coarse hair only have 1 to
Yeah.
2 per follicle, which is the pore, which in result, their hair has this coarse, thick feel, but looks like they might not have as much sometimes because it's spaced out further on their scalp because that diameter is taking up more space than someone with finer hair. Does that make
Mm,
sense? Which
yes.
also will play a role on when you cut someone's hair and when you're coloring their hair, how dimension will look if you're doing highlighting and just single processes, how the light's going to infuse or diffuse through that hair texture. It's very important.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, to know if it's fine or coarse hair.
Also, interesting to note, if you were to like cut a hair in half and look at it under a microscope, as Dimitri, you're saying, with the diameter, if it is naturally straight hair, it will be like a perfect circle. And if it's curly hair that you have, it will look like an oval.
Mhm. Yes.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, it's cool. The science part of it, I love it.
Yes. And also now this is a Demetra thing, but that I wanted to talk about. So I've heard a lot of hair cutters in my day talking about how sometimes it can be frustrating when people want just a trim, quote unquote, because they think it might be different than a haircut. And I've had people yelling at me saying, why don't they understand that it's what I'm leaving on your head that matters? So
Yeah.
tell me your thoughts on that.
So basically, do you mean as far as like when someone wants to come in and get a cut? They're saying, "Oh, I just want to trim," opposed to getting a haircut, right?
Yes, thinking it's like a less expensive or less time consuming process
Right.
to have
And
just
it's
a trim.
not. So if you just kind of look at my hands right now, this is a 1/2 inch, right? This is 1 inch, right? And this is like a dusting. Regardless, I have to go through the exact same motions, whether it's a 1/2 inch a quarter dusting, trim per se, or a full haircut. I have to take the exact same angles, the exact same time to make that exact same snip with the scissors. So it doesn't
Yes.
matter if it's a trim or a cut, you're taking 5 inches off. At the end of the day, you have to go through the exact same process to do whatever be in, length and the time, right? It's the exact same
Yes.
amount of time I'm taking. Um, and I also would like to say that with the hair 101, the health about the hair, a lot of times people ask me, how is it that if I'm cutting off the dead ends, how is that helping the health of my hair? And what I like to explain to people is the reason why that helps your hair to grow is because your hair will not continue to split as much. Okay, so when you cut and get regular trims on your hair comes in healthier, better. Okay. If you don't cut your hair at all and you want to go 6 months, those little split ends that you have on the bottom will continue to travel up the hair shaft and it'll continue to go and eventually will give itself a haircut. So if you don't cut your hair, now your hair is giving itself a haircut from the breakage and the split ends. And then it will also travel to at some point to your scalp and then fall out from your scalp. Now you start thinning your hair. So it is very important to cut the dead ends off of your hair to have healthy hair because it eventually will reach the scalp if you don't get regular
Yes.
haircuts. Okay. I don't know if that was a good enough explanation of why,
Absolutely.
cutting dead ends off actually help your hair to grow. Does that make
Yes.
sense? Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Also, it is very important to understand that healthy hair growing has to do with your scalp, and actually having length, as Demetra's saying, really is by treating your ends. Otherwise, it's just going to be the same length. So if somebody,
Hmm.
it could be a combination of issues, but if you're coloring your hair a certain way or not getting regular haircuts, and I've come across people who say I can't grow my hair longer than my shoulders, and this is why.
Yeah. Because you're not trimming it enough. So the hair is just giving itself a haircut.
Yeah,
Is what ends up happening,
yeah,
and then it's just causing more damage because the cuticle is being lifted now throughout the hair shaft several times, and then your hair looks frizzier. It also looks worse in its condition. So it does play a big role in, like we said, the hair health. It's important to get regular, even if it's a trim. I know they cost the same as a haircut, people, but it's for the benefit of healthy hair.
awesome. Well,
Mm-hmm.
I think we wind it up here because we're going to be sending people back to this episode over and over and over in
Mm-hmm.
relation to other topics that we're going to
Yes,
have.
that will be related to Hair 101, but we're going to come back and, we'll talk about, shampooing, conditioning, and hair products and, you know, all that hair related stuff. We got lots of stuff to talk about.
Yes, and keep all this stuff in mind. And we're going to bring it up next week when we talk about keratin treatments.
Yes.
Excellent. All right. Thanks so much for joining us. We will see you next week.
Don't forget, thumbs up, like, subscribe.